And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to the Valley of the Judged. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me I have my good brother here in the temple, the master of the Wanderer's Library, good brother Sig.
Hello, everybody. Hope you're all having a wonderful evening.
Times like these, I'm glad that I try and keep something akin to a distillery in the back end of the monastery, because Lord knows I think we're gonna need it.
No kidding.
We're back at this again for the first time, covering something brand new and covering it relatively quickly compared to its release date, as opposed to times when I wait weeks or something, because I wanted to get this out. I wanted to get this out of my system.
Yeah, I've been looking at this for the past few hours, and I'm already pissed off.
So, it is back to us once again, being perplexed at Fabula Ultima. I'm going to bury the lead that we are going to be significantly harsher to this than I think other people within the tabletop as well as indie tabletop space are going to be. Now, if someone looked back at the previous videos that I have done on Fabula Ultima, they might argue, oh, you're just a hater. I am not. What I am is somebody for whom I was not starstruck at the idea of console RPG in tabletop form. Because it is not just through the Final Fantasy stuff, but I have gone through this multiple times over and have had a bit of a different framework compared to other people. Because I think for a lot of people, because their exposure to role-playing games began and ended with the D&D bubble, this idea was novel to them, and they didn't have a framework to judge it.
Nope.
But I do not suffer that particular problem. Whether it be things like Reminisce, Full Party Strike, ones that are a bit more setting specific, like Aegis, or the previously covered Twilight Sword, or the translation we have of Wizardry, or Blades of Ether, or Rings and Running Shoes, which is a Sonic the Hedgehog project, or Retro Phase, or Dungeon Break, or the different Elder Scrolls projects, or Cloudbreaker Alliance, or Espers, or Challenge Dungeon, or Break, or Beacon, or Arma Fantasia, or Anima Prime, or, well, Anima Beyond Fantasy. In addition to plenty of others, the idea of console RPG or video game in tabletop form is by no stretch of the imagination new. And because of the fact that it is not a new thing in that sense, I have a framework to judge it on compared to, I think, a large amount of my colleagues. And that's not even getting into, even though I covered a fair few games from the Returners lineage, there's plenty of other FF-like games that I didn't cover. Point is, this is something that's been done a lot, so I have a framework, and I can judge it on other people who have done it in the same way that I look at the current state of things when it comes to boomer shooters, which we're in a bit of a renaissance over the last few years of. But we've crossed the threshold between the idea of doing a throwback to 90s shooters to the point where you got to do more than that. Like if somebody says, "Oh, we're a throwback to Quake," I'm like, all right, so we're a dozen other people. Like Reflex has been around for years.
Yep.
Or especially if someone says, "Oh, we're trying to be a throwback to Doom," and I'm like, so is Proteus. What else you got?
Proteus, I feel like, does a lot more for, the whole boomer shooter, because it's not only made with great love from developers that know what the fuck they're doing, but there's so much more to it.
That's more to it is pretty standard across the board with a lot of the ones that we've seen covered, especially by New Blood. Like it would be disingenuous of me to look at a medieval and just say, "Oh, this is just a cleaned up version of Heretic."
No, it's not.
Oh,
it is so much more than that.
For better and for worse, in some cases, like fucking
this
Sun
is
Guardian.
True.
Also, the Pain Master.
He's a master of pain, after all.
And yeah, and yes, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up Ion Fury, which is definitely channeling Shadow Warrior for better and for worse, especially if you play on higher difficulties.
Oh You know,
for the same reason, you're not going to see me play Blood on Extra Crispy.
I don't think even I'm crazy enough to do that, and I love a good challenge.
Or the same reason that I never played Duke Nukem 3D on Damn I'm Good.
Yeah, fuck playing on Damn I'm Good.
Oh. And same reason I don't play Doom on Nightmare. I did it for like a few minutes, but then when I realized the gimmick of it, I was like, this is not fun. Oh. I'll do ultra violence. I just won't do Nightmare.
Well, UV is the standard, so if you're gonna play on hard, UV is the way to go.
Yeah. But the point is that the idea of console RPG in tabletop form is in that same vein as if someone tries to say, "Oh, I'm building an RPG that's based on anime." Which, putting aside for the fact that that's been done plenty of times, it's also a wide net. This is when I did my initial review a few years back. This was something I distinctly remember pointing out, that the game builds itself on live out your JRPG fantasy. But putting aside my issues with that term, what that fantasy means is not going to be the same across the board.
Because saying something like that is pretty broad.
That's also the reason why a lot of those anime TTRPGs in the late 90s and early 2000s, with one exception, didn't exactly stick around. Because a lot of them were just a hop skip away from being universalist games. Even ones I liked, like Open Versatile Anime, which has had the unfortunate problem of not having a whole lot of support since.
That's unfortunate.
And, you know, the forums are pretty much kaput. I haven't heard hide nor hair from I haven't seen Wise Turtle say anything in years, but... And I'd like to point out that that review that I did was published on October of 2023. And hi, I coach. Welcome to the party. Just a few months after my interview with Emmanuel Galetto. And it took 3 years for us to get a Bestiary. When a lot of games in and out of fantasy will do something like that from the word go. And
and we're going to go into that because I have a lot of things to say about this whole thing.
And it's like Kochi had to replace the I with a 1. I getcha. The fact that now, yes, there is the NPC thing in the core book, which we'll get to that in a minute.
Oh dear God!
Now, even though this is the Bestiary, we're not going to be going through every single monster entry because over 366 pages, that would be a bit excessive.
That's absurd.
But there are plenty of highlights that we will get into.
Oh,
and
yes.
This is the 4th entry where I've been talking about this game, and one might argue, if I was so critical of the core book, why do I go back to it? Well, when I covered the Atlas books in that musing, the story is not yours. That was because a dear friend of the channel asked me to, and I said that I would, and I am a man of my word. The one before with Sig here, that was due to wanting to experiment with other games that were in a similar ballpark to what we've done with Legend Edition and Look About Cross Conversion. That was one of multiple entries that I had done, because I did a similar thing with Cloudbreaker Alliance and with Beacon and with Skies Above.
And Fabula Ultima was so painful to get through.
For me, this is a revisit to something I had visited in the past. For you, this is your first entry into it, and I remember you having your issues. And to recap on that, just to set the stage for things. Now, the issues that I had can be boiled down into 2 pillars, and maybe you came to a similar conclusion after we did that stream. One of them was a lack of proper guidance for a game that wants to let people build their own fantasy. At least lack of proper guidance in the core book. And also a far too particular way the design wants you to play the game. It is telling you what to do instead of showing you. I know a lot of
Yes.
hack YouTubers use the term "show don't tell," as if it's a magic bullet. But to use a wrestling reference, I liken it to the difference between Flair Sting matches and Flair Lex matches, because Lex would be told by Flair what to do, but he wouldn't tell him why. So as a result of that, they didn't have all that great matches. And Lex wasn't exactly the most flexible worker as is.
Mm-hmm.
But that's another story. Point is that instead of providing a sandbox to explore and turn into something personalized for a table, there's a lot of elements where it wants one specific way for you to play. And I think that runs counter to the "this is your story" tagline that's on the damn book twice.
It's not even just in the core book. If you look back at the atlases, which I did today just to kind of get some notes on this, there's a very similar thing, especially when it comes to designing bosses for the particular settings, which is like, timeout, one moment. Why not just make an example setting for each of these? Save yourself a whole bunch of time and just put them in the fucking core book, which is what should have been done in the first place.
The core book had none. I remember going over the pillars thing with Xanatrix, and there was one phrase that we kept using. This is broad when it needs to be specific, and specific when it needs to be broad. And
yes,
in that initial review, when I talked about a guidance problem, a lot of people tried to gaslight me and claim that the reason that I had an issue is because I wanted my hand held. Guidance is not the same as hand holding. I viscerally reject hand holding. What my issue was that you need to understand the rules before you can break them, especially if you're relying heavily on the narrative ability of the table. That and relying on genre savviness is not a good idea. Just from a design perspective. And I'm not singling out Fabula for this, because I said the same thing about Marvel Multiverse. Because a lot of that game assumed that you were primarily familiar with the current run of Marvel Comics. And people are going to come at a Marvel RPG in different angles. I'm not saying you have to have rules for all of those potential angles. That would be a bit nuts. But you should write from a neutral perspective. Because think about it this way. For the idea of live out your JRPG fantasy, for a lot of people, yes, that's going to be one of the many Final Fantasies. But it could just as likely be something like, say, Etrian Odyssey, or Wild Arms, or Suikoden, or the Tales of series, or Star
Ys.
Ocean, yeah, or Ys,
or the Legend of Heroes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I can go on for days with entries, but it is such a wide net. I brought up Anima Prime earlier. Anima Prime doesn't really have that problem because it specifically has a sample setting that they are upfront about the fact that it's drawing heavily from Avatar and Final Fantasy. And the sample setting they make clear you don't have to use, but here's an example of the kind of setting work that you could do with the game. An easy way to help hammer home what sort of game something is by having a setting. I know a lot of people will say, "Oh, I don't use the existing setting. I make my own." First off, a lot of times when people say that, they don't have a setting, they have a set of bullet points, for one. And they're usually building around the genre savviness of their table. But two, even if you don't use it, having it as a baseline is vital.
Mhm.
Imagine how meandering Anima Beyond Fantasy would be if it didn't have Gaia.
That would be kind of a headache considering the sheer crunchiness of that game.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know some might look at Legend Edition and go, you're one to talk. Except not really, because I established right out of the gate that I was going agnostic, and why I was doing it. So I ended up sidestepping that problem. Simply because of the fact that instead of playing halfsies about setting agnosticism, I'm like, no, I'm not writing a setting in the book. The rules are a toolkit.
A toolkit which really helped put out Estelon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, housekeeping aside, let us begin proper. Now, I will note that obviously the Fabula Ultima books have had very good production design.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's no arguing there.
Yeah. Though, you know how there's that statement that good art doesn't necessarily make a good comic book?
Mm-hmm.
Same principle. Now, something that I do want to touch on that was in the foreword as a no shit, and this was something I saw early on, and I was like, okay, this is definitely a case where we need to cover this. Saying, over time, Fabula Ultima has spread far beyond its original audience of video game fans, who often had an instinctive grasp of what makes turn-based battles interesting, varied, and fair. Because of this, the tools presented in the core rulebook, which relied on the reader's familiarity with JRPG battle design and had proven adequate during playtests, were no longer sufficient. No shit!
Yeah. That was a big problem that you had there.
Are you familiar with the concept of survivorship bias?
Kind of, but you may have to elaborate.
Let me grab the specific definition so I'm not talking out of my ass. But this is a legit problem that can happen in testing just across the board. Whether it be in the financial field, whether it be in engineering. The wiki entry is survivorship bias or survivor bias is a statistical error that results from concentrating on entities that passed the selection process while overlooking those that did not. This can lead to incorrect conclusion based on incomplete data. It can also lead to the false belief that the successes in a group have some special property rather than just a coincidence, i.e., correlation proves causality. And the reason why I bring this kind of thing up is there's been this was a case of if your playtest group is highly video game savvy and because of that they don't have to deal with that familiarity, then you can come to the erroneous conclusion, which they did, that the tools to assume the table knows enough about battle design in console RPGs is sufficient, when in reality it isn't. Now, I know I'm bringing myself up in this, but since everybody wants to compare my work to Fabula Ultima, I say it's fair game. But even though we make a whole lot of references to different Final Fantasies in Legend Edition, I don't think this is an issue that we ended up having. I didn't, because of the fact that everything's laid out, I don't think there's the issue of assuming people know how console RPG battle design works. And the fact that some of the people I did in the Agito Arcanum playtests had no familiar with console RPGs at all in some cases, and were still able to manage, says volumes. But I feel like that was a case. I feel like that was a case of if, and I'm not saying this as a I'm so much better than Rooster on this. It's more of if I, someone with a much smaller team and much smaller resources, was aware of that problem, why wasn't he? And I do think survivorship bias plays a factor. Now then. And actually, I'm going to make one little edit to how this is viewed so that the 2-page spreads come out properly. There we go. That is a nice behemoth-looking thing.
I do like that. That design is actually really nice.
Mm-hmm. Oh.
One of very few good things I will say about this.
So, obviously the book is divided into an introduction, quick assembly, which is meant to be a faster alternative for NPC creation. The compendium. The compendium is the part we're going to be skimming the most. New options, specifically for the Wayfarer, Arcanist, and Weapon Master classes, along with a few other things, and the appendix, which, yeah, of course they have an index. We are men, not animals. Now, they go into a before we start and going into game design, game master principles, and this sort of thing. I end up thinking about the fact that despite a lot of people pushing me to try and do some sort of GM advice thing, I didn't.
That's
I actually
because
did.
The advice you would, I was about to say, it's because the advice you would aim to give is so broad and would not apply to every situation because every GM has a different style.
That, and I actually did write one, but it was so generic I scrapped it. But I think this was one part that you had some issues with.
Oh yes, right out of the gate. Let me get my notes on that because I do have some.
Yeah.
Because I feel like the points he tries to nail here are incredibly broad. Like, yeah.
Oh. So the interesting and engaging part, saying your goal is not to make each foe as strong and optimized as possible, but to showcase unique gameplay interactions. I think unique gameplay interactions is something that should be encouraged, but to say that it should be your goal is a bit much.
I feel like it's stating it as a requirement, and unfortunately, every table is different. Every table's players are different. You're not going to be able to account for everything.
And stating that enemy design is not an arms race between you and the players, that can very much just be summarized as the fact that this is not a competition. You're trying to build a story collaboratively.
Which should go without saying, but alas, here we are.
And saying design for the group. saying,
Bullshit.
imagine...
I cannot tell you how many times I've tried to design encounters for my Fury of the Land campaign,
Mhm.
and I have either done too well or I have fucked up in some way.
So, I understand what the intent here is, but if I were to give an example of a better use of this, I think of the monster roles that are in games like Draw Steel, in D&D 4th edition, and in Heroes Against Darkness,
Mhm.
where instead of saying, oh, you need to design for the group, there are specific roles that are presented that have their own motifs. Almost, I'd hesitate to call them monster classes, but more like monster roles.
Mhm. Which they actually do get to later in this.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that's another one of the few good things I will say about this.
Yeah. And I yes, you should reward abilities and try not to just make enemies that are meant to punish or counteract. But that's less of a design for the group thing and just a basic ass observation.
Mhm.
Like there's a reason nobody likes those scenes where you have all your equipment confiscated for a moment. You know, you're thrown in jail and you have to try and get your stuff back and do a stealth section in a game that was not built for stealth.
Mhm.
I don't need to list out specific games because you can already think of a few cases of that, and it's never fun.
Oh yeah.
Oh.
I don't know. In some cases, like maybe Thief, they can be pretty fun, but
Yeah, but you're gonna be
more,
losing your stuff between missions anyways in Thief, and Thief
yeah,
is a stealth game.
that is true. Still though.
Mhm. Uh, also, usually in that situation, you end up running into Benny. We like Benny.
Here.
But then when it comes to the whole no retrying, um, this was something that I felt that this falls into that category of telling people how to play rather than showing them.
Yes.
Because okay, you want to have the whole surrender thing, and then the story moves on. That should not be a designer decision to make. That should be a
Not
table
to
decision.
mention, yeah. Not to mention, the whole paragraph reads like it's saying it's reads like it's trying to say do counter to what it's trying to say.
And when it came to the whole question of what do you do when there's a party wipeout, I left that vague within Legend Edition, and that was for a specific purpose. I remember reading the question of character death in 13th Age, and the designers of that game didn't agree on the way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I think one of them wanted no retries whatsoever and permadeath, and another wanted the dramatic approach a la 7th Sea. And the position that I took is that's not my decision to make.
Mm-hmm.
If you, in fact, I wrote, character death is not assumed to be the outcome of failure in Final Fantasy Legend Edition. KO'd characters are not dead, they are unconscious. Should the entire party be KO'd, they have lost the encounter. There may be narrative consequences for such a failure. However, the severity of these consequences is up to your playgroup to decide. I distinctly remember a certain person who was insistent that I needed to have some sort of death rule. I held firm in not doing that because when you look at the source material, when you look at the video games, one thing you will see quite a bit is the fact that permanent character death is rare and usually the culmination of a dramatic moment.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something that is so contextual that me putting rules for it is not worth the trouble.
And I'll go a step further and say any character deaths that happen in Final Fantasy are usually pretty impactful, rare as they may be.
Mm-hmm. The major, aside from 2, which has the highest body count of any of any one mainline Final Fantasy.
I feel like there should be a kill count for that game alone.
Mm-hmm. Someone probably has done that. I just haven't found it yet. The most amount of permanent character deaths that we see in FFs is 3, and that was in 4, and one of them was reversed. Because it technically wasn't death; it was petrification.
The other one was Sid blowing himself up.
Which he got better. And the only other permanent one was Fusoya.
Rip.
And the most famous one the most famous case is of course 7, and you only have that one. And that one is built up for quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
So it's that sort of thing from a outside looking in is not something that you can really write for.
No.
And they also put in no scripted defeats, which I know forced loss battles are annoying, but I don't think they should be taken off the table if it's a situation that is called for them.
Especially if it's like a narrative thing and it just makes sense to do, which if you do that, you don't do it often because it becomes a point where that can get abused very quickly.
What something like this is telling me is those infamous last stand stories that you see in universes like Warhammer or BattleTech should not be done at the campaign, or even something like the final moments of Reach. Current objective: survive. Or even the infamous nuke scene in Modern Warfare. And saying you should frame it as an escape sequence or where they have to survive for a specific number of rounds before help arrives, and that has to be known to the players. Again, it's that specificness of this is what you have to do, not what's a good idea to do, that bugs the hell out of me.
Yeah, that's the language in it just rubs me the wrong way.
Mm-hmm. Now, then there's, and I remember you pointing this out to me before we went live. The 90% chance thing.
Yeah, that was like, what? 90? No. That number should be at least 20% lower, in my opinion. Because most of the time, your players are going to survive, even against something fairly challenging.
Yeah. A TPK should not be a point of pride. It should be it should be actually a mark of shame, in my opinion. Either shame on the players for not using their tools effectively, or shame on the GM for putting them in a situation where they couldn't use their tools effectively.
Which I admit I have done. And it's something I've looked to rectify in all games since.
Yeah. But the secret is never to let them win with the same strategy twice in a row. This is one of the... It's... The problem with a lot of this is so much of it can be undermined by context.
that and that. I have a general rule when it comes to this: never do the same thing twice, like it says.
Oh yeah, and
Otherwise, shit overstays its welcome, and it just gets boring for everybody involved.
oh, and hello there, Riona. But I think
Fiona.
I have I have an approach personally that I will freely admit I ripped off from early Bungie that I think is apropos, even if it's one that a lot of people misunderstand. If you can create 15 seconds of fun, you can stretch that out into a whole game.
Mm-hmm.
I've mentioned this in the past, and the guy who said that, he's expressed frustration with how he feels a lot of people didn't understand what he was getting at. Because what he's doing is a loop that can be repeated through context.
Mm-hmm.
I've used the first few minutes of Combat Evolved as an example, but another example would be the way enemies evolve and encounters evolve in the first Arkham game.
Mm-hmm.
Is you have the standard approach where it's teaching you the importance of not only hitting but also knowing when to counter. Then they start introducing variations on enemies that require specific ways you overcome them, and you have to juggle all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with introducing the way the Predator scenes work.
Mm-hmm.
You're doing the same thing in all of them, but because of either map layout or the type of enemies you're dealing with, it ends up feeling different because of the context involved.
And I think a lot of that, just like with most games, especially one of my favorites, Doom 2016, it's all about pacing as well.
Yeah. They bring up assumptions about the group.
Oh, I was reading this to Tab at dinner, and I've got some things to say.
Well, this is the time to say. I mean, also hello. Thank you for wishing us good luck.
So I read this. Let's just go line by line. When we created adversaries for this book, as well as for the atlases, which don't even get me started on those.
We've already covered that.
I was about to say, don't even get me started on those steaming piles of crap. We followed this set of assumptions that defines an average group for 4 players. Now, that's where you fucked up right there. That's the first thing. One character can reliably store hit points to 3 or more targets at once. Not everyone's going to play a mage or a healer or anything like that, so that's a pretty bad assumption to have. If they do, great. But usually that's from a group of gamers that is either moderately to fairly experienced. One character can reliably remove status effects from 3 or more targets at once, or make multiple targets immune to various status effects. If you're having people do that, that is a you problem. That is a skill issue on your part.
Surprise,
2 or 3 characters can deal enough damage to defeat soldier rank enemies in less than 4 actions without exploiting vulnerabilities.
Also, hey there, Hydra. Thank you for the raid. Welcome to the shit show as we delve into the Fabula Bestiary. I do want to interject and say that with a lot of the assumptions here, there's one major problem. Fabula Ultima wants to be a game that has multi-classing as the default.
Mm-hmm.
Or at the very least, heavily encouraged.
And I feel like the worst part about it is the multi-classing isn't very good and feels very limited.
But the problem is with these assumptions are ones that you could make if you're dealing with a single class design, but that's not the case here.
Which honestly, I feel like a single class design in this instance would be a lot better, rather than having 2 or 3 at starting level 5.
Yeah, if you're going to have these sort of assumptions, that was just something I wanted to point out.
Yeah.
But and each of the assumptions kind of falls into that. Um,
Hmm.
it also helps me reinforce why I didn't do the whole what a balanced encounter looks like, because when you're dealing with a game where multi-classing is baked in like that, the idea of average completely goes out the window, because there are so many potential combinations you'd have to account for that it's not feasible.
Hmm.
Like,
And going as an example, going back to my Fury of the Land campaign, starting off, I had 3 adepts, 1 warrior, and 1 mage. Well,
mhm.
2 mages. Um, no expert stuff whatsoever. But my players managed to make it work very well. And this these assumptions are operating on the assumption that your group is going to be optimized.
Yeah.
And that's not always going to be the case.
That's the same problem. That's the same thing that was the reason why I fell out of favor when it came to challenge rating. All the way back
Ew.
in 2000, all the way back in 2001, when I was playing D&D Third Edition. Uh,
Ugh.
and I made the because that challenge rating in both Third Edition and with Fifth, because it wasn't in Fourth, is operating under the assumption of a balanced party of 4, which was code word for using the original 4 classes. And the thing is, even when I did that interview, we both spoke fondly about Fourth Edition, and Fourth Edition has roles for the different classes. The thing is, though, those roles are something that the class is built around, and different classes with the same role may do it differently, but it's ultimately to the same umbrella. You know, any defender class is going to have some kind of ability that's all about drawing aggro and punishing enemies that don't target you. Strikers are always going to have some sort of effect that lets you do additional damage to that one target you singled out. Controllers are always going to have debuffs and or AoE effects. And leaders are always going to have some effect that does damage and does some either does damage or does a mix of damage and some support ability. Whether it allowing actions like say the warlord, or healing like say cleric,
Hmm.
or shoring up defenses like both of them. But because of the multi-classing setup, you can't really build around those kind of roles, which this very much wants to.
It wants to, and it fails spectacularly.
Now, a game like Draw Steel that can handle these kind of roles perfectly, because multi-classing is a secondary thing and one that has a bit of a higher floor. It's one of the trade-offs if you're going to do the whole multi-classing as default. You can't really do average at that point.
Not to mention, there are so many tools within the classes themselves and the monsters that it almost balances out.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't use that term lightly.
And in the case of what I was doing with Legend Edition, if somebody asked me a balanced encounter, the most I could say is a mix of normal and notorious, or boss and normal. Using the 4 tier setup that I have, but
Hmm.
that's still extremely broad, which is why that particular section got scrapped.
Hmm.
Uh, and then they go into groups with only 2 or 3 PCs, or groups that don't make any of the assumptions, uh, or players that are not invested in highly tactical play and prefer a relaxed experience. Um, I remember some of the campaigns with Sword World having having certain monsters that where the number of them was based on the number of party members, which honestly feels like a simpler way to do things. And as far as the whole wanting a more relaxed experience, uh, if that's the case, why did you guys pick this?
Yeah.
uh, I've seen some say with Legend Edition, what if I want something a little bit more relaxed? I'm like, then this game is not going to be for you. That's perfectly fine. Not every game is built for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, if you have more than four, oh, instead of worrying about difficulty, I think the party size should place a bigger focus on time.
Mm-hmm.
The more participants you have, the longer encounters are going to go, and time should be a bigger concern, I think, than how hard it is.
Which is pretty damn important considering the emphasis that this game in the core book puts on time.
Mm-hmm. But then they go into communication, which this was something that you and I had talked about. That was a bit of an issue of this idea that you must declare these certain mechanics.
No. The only time you will ever declare that is if they hit a certain damage type and it's a weakness or it's a resistance.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
And
no need to over-explain, no need to go into anything else.
I think about unknown armies, which doesn't even tell you HP, for example, or the fact that you should be clear when it comes to certain mechanics, yes.
Mm-hmm.
But some of the things that they, instead of saying always say if a creature is in crisis, I think this would be better served with stating, describing the state of the thing, in order to give signposting.
Or, and this is something I would put in if they did enter crisis, desperation. I love desperation mechanics in games.
Mm-hmm. But
because then you know shit's gonna get real.
stating always say if a creature is in crisis, I think that's meant to be analogous to when you can clearly see when a monster is in its tired state.
Mm-hmm.
Think of the different skins that were used for enemies in say Quake, or especially Doom Eternal.
Oh yeah.
But there's ways to do that narratively. But they also talk about routines that they perform on even and odd rounds. Basically a soft AI.
Mm-hmm.
I know they say this may seem like a flaw, but I feel like this is something that is more. And FF14 did this as well, but I feel like this is something that is going to lean more in favor of solo games rather than party-based games. And personally, instead of doing one routine, it's far more advisable to have multiple ones. A really good example of this was the AI hex grids that were done in Emberwind, which is another case of a game that is drawing heavily on console-style RPGs. But with Emberwind, you roll a...
I was about to say, that was the one with the different attack sequences, wasn't it?
Yeah, you roll a d6, and then you go along the hexes from the center one to do a certain set of actions. Some of those actions are movements, some of them are attacks, some of them are special abilities. And higher tier ones are going to have bigger hexes and thus more potential variety, as well as the potential for unlocking certain hexes.
Mm-hmm.
And I know one could, I know it could be argued that yes, this sort of soft AI thing is a nod to um video games, but I find it's the fact that um that they only have um one routine is something that kind of bugs me. Hell, even the soft AI we see with the fellows in Sword World doesn't have that problem.
Hmm.
It has a whole, even if they're only doing one action, it has a whole grid that they work with. We covered that on Sunday, if you'll recall.
Yep.
Uh, but then talking about ranks and parts, um, which I don't really have a whole lot to dissect on this. There's nothing wrong with having
Yeah.
ranked tiers. I do it. There's nothing wrong with having parts. I have a whole ability focused on that. What I
Yeah, like I said, this is one of the few parts I'll actually praise
mhm.
because, like you, I do a tiered thing. I mean, from fodder to soldiers,
Mhm.
the heavies, and then the big boys,
Yeah.
as it were.
Uh, I also don't have any notes regarding elemental interactions, except for the fact that I didn't feel I had elemental interactions as a suggestion, but not a requirement, and not built
Hmm.
around mostly built around binaries instead of a rock paper scissors approach.
Hmm.
Both as a nod to the game, but also the fact that it's an easier way to build around, unless
Hmm.
especially when you have so many different elements. The one thing that they did that I didn't do is have poison as an element. Uh, and
Which I
yeah,
find is an odd design choice.
I know spells like Bio have traditionally done poison damage. The reason I didn't do that personally is because how many other effects, aside from a handful of spells, and maybe some weapons, are going to be doing poison damage specifically?
Hmm.
Uh, but and as far as the talk about dynamism and stability when it comes to pacing, uh, there's not a whole lot to dissect.
Hmm.
And truth be told, I think this is something that there's no way that you can really write advice for it easily because of how contextual like, everybody's table is going to be. Uh, but even with this, it still falls into that habit of telling instead of showing.
Yeah.
Giving an example would really work wonders in these situations. Uh, and the same thing with like frequency and effect. Like it keeps having that problem of telling people what to do. And as far as the troubleshooting thing, there's not. This is another one of those cases of not a whole lot to dissect. It's a glorified FAQ.
And this is where an example of play would come in handy, but that's something that even the core book doesn't have.
You know, I'm starting to come around to the idea that maybe the replay thing that we see a lot in tabletop games in Japan should be at least explored here in the West.
Hmm.
Uh, I don't think I don't think this game is going to have the people who could do it. And if I were to do it for my own campaigns, I would need to have a proper writer.
Hmm.
But that is a colorful ass owl. Then we get
I want
to
one.
quick assembly. Now, something that I want to note before we get into quick assembly. I looked back at the NPC creation system that was in the core book for Fabula, and one of the big problems that I had was it's not very clear about the baseline of challenge when it comes to levels, and levels can go from 5 to 60.
Yep.
Like what it really gives is just the way to set up the base stats, and is somewhat broad about specific abilities. Probably because there wasn't any attempt to build an NPC creation system from the start. Which is most definitely something I did. That was a big point of contention that I had. But with quick assembly, this is their attempt at doing a simpler version, which is kind of amusing because the version of the core book was already pretty simple. In fact, too simple as is. And yeah, they do go into roles as mentioned. I think this would have been a great thing to have in the core book.
Yep.
As well as things like boss skills, negative skills, and species. The core book and the atlases relied way too much on genre savviness and just reskinning existing monsters. The exact same problem that people have with D&D. One thing that this doesn't answer is a level baseline.
Yeah. That and the fact that just based on the different classifications of them, you're going to have so much more work to do.
Something that I find amusing when it comes to the principles that they mention is roles are not your priority. When, if that's the case, why are they there to begin with? And the illusion of average. If you know that most groups are anything but average, why did you spend the whole page talking about average assumptions? But the assembly rules are: you pick a role, you assign a level and a rank. The level must either be 5 or a multiple of 10. If the boss enemy, then mark them as a champion. Once again, I don't know what the baseline, not the baseline, but the suggested ranges of difficulty for levels are. If it's something that's meant to be parallel to the PCs or not. Probably not, because of how high NPC levels can go.
And for a game that doesn't want you to optimize encounters, it sure has a lot of stuff for you to optimize encounters.
And they do have suggestions on damage ranges for minor, heavy, and massive for level ranges. But that's only a taster. That's not enough. Now, they do say NPCs are always level 5, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, or 60. But again, I need to know where the line is. And when it comes to go ahead.
I was about to say, just judging from some of the stuff I'm reading here, I'm going to assume, at least just from a cursory glance, that the baseline level is 5.
Yeah. But that is an assumption that we're building due to prior experience. And if this is your first rodeo, then you need that kind of guidance. Uh, a lot of instead of I feel like what should have been done instead of saying it's multiples of 10. Instead I think a something like a level budget should have been done.
Hmm.
Uh, now
A level budget and a baseline set of abilities for a specific classification of whatever monster you're throwing at them.
yeah. When it comes to the rolls, obviously brutes are pinkies.
Brutes are the heavies.
Hmm. Brutes are the simple heavies. They do have the way that they'd be set up, and some potential variations, which is nice. I will admit that.
Mm-hmm.
But
I can give it praise for that.
Yeah. The hunter is meant to be your glass cannon. The mage is meant to be your caster. Which if it's just mage is your caster, that is a little bit broad.
Mm-hmm.
Because because magic use can be in multiple different forms. Saboteur is your debuffer.
Mm-hmm.
And Sentinel is your tank. In fact, I'd say Sentinel is the pinky.
Yep. Your front lines, your ones that will charge into battle first. So your pinkies, your Hell Knights, your Mancubi, even. No, I think Mancubi are super heavies, if I recall correctly. No, Mancubis are heavy.
Yep. Then support is the buffers. The mage you're supposed to geek first. The leader types you saw in the Dark Ages.
Which killing those was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Then they go into boss skills. Which you could give a champion NPC using the quick assembly rules. Which now I do appreciate that the skills are categorized. But with a lot of these skills are a case of and this is a problem I'm going to be asking quite a bit. Why wasn't this made immediately after the core book or alongside the core book?
Yeah, because I feel like this would have served to do better in the core book. It's almost like the core book bestiary was unfinished.
It probably was. Like a lot of times it comes down to time. Time or not having room. And when it comes to the different skills that are present here, again, I have to wonder why it took 3 years for this kind of thing, and second, if you're gonna tell people don't worry too much about optimization, why are you putting so much emphasis on optimizing?
Because the species skill, this is fine. I don't care about this. This is perfectly okay. Even though I think the monster classification is a little broad, but I digress.
But then we get into the compendium. And They do bring up the roles again, but also parts, like if it's part of a main body or solo, that's straight out of 4th edition.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and unique and villain. I feel like those kind of things would be better served in the Atlas books. Oddly enough, if they're gonna be about settings or about tones.
They have those in the Atlas books.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the uniques and the villains, but they've sort of combined them, but they don't outright state that that's what they are.
Yeah. And when it comes to the whole advantageous and disadvantageous approaches, I don't have too much to say on it that we haven't already said.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with guidelines. And I will note the making adjustments part where they talk about how to modify some of the stats for if you want the monster to be above or below a certain level. Thank you for reminding me why I didn't do base levels for monsters. Because yeah, this is the problem with a lot of games that use set levels for their bestiaries.
Mm-hmm.
And this was precisely why I didn't do that. Because it is going to create this problem.
Yeah, it's gonna make things, like I said, it's gonna make a lot more work for the GM, and that's if you're trying to do a beer and pretzels game, like you stated in your original video on this.
Mm-hmm.
Be that. But if you're trying to make something crunchy, be that.
Mm-hmm. Same thing when it comes to adjusting rank. Now I have rank set, but a big reason I did that is because of the fact that rank should intentionally be broad.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you end up having a bit of contradiction when you have, like how we have multiple ranks of champion, for example, and at the same time having levels. But
yeah, because I feel like with the champion stuff, they're trying to create like a bunch of different difficulties and just having one static difficulty.
Mm-hmm. Now, when it comes to the bestiary itself, there's obviously the visual style is nice. The way that it's handling boss monsters is cute and all. Especially with the whole multiple parts thing, I understand the reference.
Now, that's fine. Although I have to question the Arachne design choice here.
Mm-hmm.
What in the eldritch fuck is that?
Yeah, let me. Is that what would happen if the Laughing God from 40K decided to convert Driders to its cause?
That is a hell of a nasty Drider if that's the case.
But having these sort of, as nice as these are, it does fall into one particular trap that I tried to avoid personally. A big dumb list.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's not to say the list here is dumb per se. That's just how I've coined that term. Oh.
Not to mention, I feel like it's way too scattered. Like you're like the NPC design in Legend Edition, for example, it's divided into abilities, feats, and spells.
Mm-hmm.
That's good enough for me.
Oh.
Here it goes into basic attacks, spells, other actions, and special effects, which I feel like is leaning into 5e's freaking monster creation, which gives me a headache to this day.
I'm assuming you're talking about things like layer actions and legendary actions.
And mythic actions,
Hmm.
and in Planet Apocalypse's case, shadow actions.
Yep. But the I get that it wants to have that escalating difficulty of monster tier. But if that's the case, then don't or then organizing them just alphabetically like this isn't really going to help when people are looking for a specific monster entry.
I will say I like this bugaboo. I would use this.
Hmm. Like there's plenty. Let me see the bugaboo. Oh, why do I get the feeling you would use that as a cousin to the Tonberry of plot convenience?
Because I would, and you know that.
Yeah,
Just this absolutely eldritch thing that does not kill you, but will make you realize there are things far worse than death.
yeah, but these when it comes to the moving past the compendium into the new options, um, and I will touch on the monster list for something else in a bit, but I want to check something before I do that. Um,
Let's go to the map.
mhm. So for that for they're introducing sample companions, new arcana, and optional rules. So the sample companions is meant to be an expansion on the faithful companion skill for the Wayfarer, which they say boasts a high ceiling and low floor of power, and depends on how much the player decides to customize their companion. Um, I have never been a big fan of treating companions as a micro version of a character.
Mm-hmm. It just creates more work for the GM and the player.
Because ultimately when you do that, you're adding another participant to encounter scenes and all the logistics that brings with it.
Which is why when I have players with companions, I tend to have the companion act on the same turn as the player.
Hmm.
It speeds things up a little bit more, but it's really only a bandage.
And of course, the 5 companion jobs in FFLE, well, you don't really have that problem because a companion is its own sheet, but also not.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's very simple. If you're acting, minor action. If they're acting, major action.
Yep.
Everything is just a variation on that. Again, that
I
whole
will
15
admit,
seconds of fun.
I do like the gang
Hmm.
companion because it kind of reminds me of the companions from Kirby's Dream Land 2.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, the companion is meant to be an arm of the character, and that is part of why I think that there's a bit too much here for something that you make for the problem with doing companions as NPCs or like is again logistics.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and as cute as the different ones are, it still has that kind of issue, and it's just as much if you're doing mounts.
I do like some of these Arcana designs though; they're
Hmm.
absolutely wonderful.
Now, Arcana is we already covered that when it came to the summoner and the fact that the original attempt with the summoner of having them be so MP expensive
Mm-hmm.
is a case of trying to emulate the inspirations too closely.
Mhm. You know what these designs kind of remind me of? The dual setup system in Circle of the Moon.
I could see it, and in fact, um, visiting the DSS system in that is something I'd be open to visiting. In the future.
That sounds
Uh,
fun.
but and truth be told, when it comes to these kind of arcana, um, what I end up thinking of is why some why these kind of things weren't in the core book. Probably because they didn't have time. But the ones in the core book are just elements.
Hmm.
Again, this when I look at these or look at some of the monster entries, um, I I see a case of that same implied setting thing that I talked about before, and many times it's always been one of my big criticisms of D&D.
Hmm.
Also, Mario asks, would you guys treat companions as more special abilities rather than an NPC or secondary character? That's pretty much what I do.
Hmm.
But then we have category-based affinities for one of the variant options. Um, which I think I may have said this in the initial review or implied it, but the way weapon categories are handled is very much favoring a particular type of setting, while also trying to claim that it isn't.
Hmm.
Uh,
Not to mention that a lot of the weapon, categories here, I feel would be better suited to damage types, but that's just me personally, rather than one static, physical, damage type thing.
Also, the whole for every category an enemy is vulnerable to, they should also be given resistance to two others or immunity or absorption. Um,
That I disagree with strongly, unless they are an elite or above.
the the tricky thing with that, especially the whole immunity or absorption to a certain category, is you end up falling to the same trap that, say, ghost enemies have in D&D, where they're immune to just about everything except force damage.
Hmm.
Oh. Or the in a lot of the shooters that we've played together, or
We haven't
the
played shooters together yet, but we should.
yeah, the types of enemies that I think you and I dislike the most are the ones that have a very specific way of dealing with them. This is why I brought up the whole thing of why I never played Duke Nukem on Damn I'm Good,
Hmm.
because
Because you have to blow up the corpses in order to make them gone for good.
mhm. It's also the reason why even though the Flood are a great narrative thing, the Flood aren't fun to fight in Halo, like
No,
at all.
especially Halo 3. I think the Flood were at their worst in Halo 3.
I mean, I get the intent. It's the problem of a lack of variety when that kind of shooter is reliant on enemy variety. And the way you deal with the Flood is ultimately shotgun.
In a lot of shotgun, fire. Of course, in early Halo, it didn't have anything that, did incendiary.
But it's the fact that the toolkit is bottlenecked.
Hmm.
But
I mean, especially in 3 with like the bigger, heavier ones, their hitbox is limited to a specific area on their body, and that's the tentacles, and that can be so hard to hit, especially in a fast-paced game like Halo.
mhm. Yeah, and when it comes to the variant of breach, which I feel like is an attempt to fix if you have enemies that don't have shields or armor. Um, I end up asking why did it take a couple years to realize that. Um, but no, with the when it comes to the pressure and stagger system, I realize several FFs since 13 have used this stagger system. Um, and if you're gonna do that as a gimmick, part of me is like there had to have been a better way to do it than another clock.
Hmm.
Uh, I have considered a stagger system that uses an alternate form of extra effort. The only reason I didn't put it in the core book is because that's overly favoring specific entries. And a big problem that you'd have to address when it comes to dealing with pressure or dealing with stagger is encounters are going to be built around it. Like you look at the way the stagger system has worked in the 13 trilogy, in 15 and 16, and it is very much built around you're building towards stagger so that you can actually start doing damage. There's nothing wrong with it, but that is something you have to address. And if you're dealing with a game that's trying to be a bit broad, I'm not sure that's a good idea.
And it's
Uh,
something that requires a lot more strategy and consumes time.
mm, uh, although the all-out attack that you see in the Persona games since 3, I think that'd be easier to work with.
I mean, I could get behind that, but the conditions for that would be very, very specific.
Hmm. But see, after that, there's the appendix proper, which having a have, having the monsters listed by level and the like. I think this is nice, but part of me feels like this should have been separated by level, then role, then rank, then species,
Hmm.
because of how specific you might need things. And when it comes to the sample formations they give, um, maybe it's just me, but I feel like this is something that is in the wrong book.
Yeah.
Uh, and that more or less covers everything, which I'm surprised we got through it as quickly as we did. I will note the aesthetic and mechanics inspirations. I raise an eyebrow at several of them.
Yeah.
Oh,
The-
but
Especially because they're trying to go with more recent games like Metaphor. Metaphor, fantastic game, by the way.
mhm. I mean, if we're gonna just be referencing popular entries, why not reference Expedition 33 while we're at it?
And that's another problem I have. They're references, they're but you don't really show, you know, those inspirations in the book.
Mhm. So overall, when it comes to the bestiary, there are some nice things, but a lot of the bad habits are still present, I think. But what's your take on this bestiary?
I do like some of the things they do. I like the fact that they have a ranking system for the different monsters. I like some of the designs and I like what it tries to do, but I feel like this creates a lot more problems than it solves.
Creating more problems than it solves. Could you expand on that?
Well, I think the biggest thing for me was the quick assembly. It's like, okay, so you got a quick assembly for a thing, and it was like you were saying. It needs to establish a baseline, which, if you look carefully, it says the baseline's level 5. But that's only because that's what the player characters are starting at.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine and all, but then it has different little things to kind of expand, like if they're not only going to be higher level, but they're going to be a different rank. That's going to create more work for the GM and really slow things down in like major encounters.
Mm-hmm. Which I can see, and when I say baseline, what I end up meaning by that is is kind of a recommended level based on what the player's level would be. If you're going to be making these arguments about average, then that is something that should be addressed. You could even get cheeky with it and say what kind of monsters would be in disc 1, 2, 3, or 4 if you really wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
But I can certainly see that issue. And I think throughout a lot of it, there is still one of the main issues that we talked about, going all the way back to our previous look, and that is the fact that the design philosophy of Fabula Ultima wants to have you on its roller coaster, if I'm going to use the theme park analogy, when what it really should be doing is developing a sandbox.
Yeah. And as you stated before, if you're going to build that sandbox, you should at least establish a setting. Or if you're going to go with multiple different genres, establish a setting for each of those. And there are other TTRPGs that you've shown me and had me on for that do a much better job of that.
Mm-hmm. Since this game wants to reference Sword World, Sword World doesn't have that problem. I think we've established that many times over through the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Because the question of setting or tone of Sword World is answered very clearly just within the first core book. Raxia. Or Forcilia if you're talking about the OG version. And yeah, the OG version did get a little bit a little bit kitchen sink at first. Like the setting wasn't established until a little ways properly until a little ways in. But it was eventually established.
Mm-hmm.
And
what Sword World does, it does very well.
Shifting to Fab Alt, the combination of playing half-seas with setting and the specificity of what you're supposed to do, I think is the reason why when I've looked at actual plays or of people's characters within Fab Alt, a lot of them are settings that end up feeling like a console RPG skin of a D&D campaign setting.
Mm-hmm. And not something that really uses what is given to you in the books.
Very, very much so. And it's because of that despite the game's claim of building your fantasy, it is not able to follow through because of that pride. Now, one could argue that the small sample size of Legend Edition hasn't gone much farther than that either. However, that was always going to be the case when you have a small sample size and a and people just starting to get their sea legs. But Fabula's been out for at least 3 years now. And you would think by that point somebody would dip into science fiction or into more naturalistic styles of fantasy. You know, 2 of the 3 that are purported in the Atlas books. But I haven't really seen that. And there's all the reason to see it if the claim of this is your story. Which, yeah, I could bring up that line is ripped from Orin, but that line, "This is your story" in Final Fantasy X, is one that ends up having a much bigger context on replay than when we first played it.
Mm-hmm.
Much like the whole thing of Orin raising a glass to a giant wave is one of those things that hits differently after you've played the game once.
Which is such a power move looking back.
Mm-hmm. Kind of shows that Orin took a lot more from his old friend than he'd be willing to admit.
Yes.
But that's a whole other story. So, with that said, if I would, has my grading for Fabula Ultima, which I graded as caution, has that changed with the introduction of this bestiary? The answer is no. I still put this as caution, and I think going forward, once the current crop of seasons for Valley of the Judged are finished, I think I'm going to make a more concerted effort to highlight games that are in that vein of trying to channel console-style RPGs. If only to showcase that there are alternatives that might be a more appropriate fit for one's table. Because I hinted at this at the start, but there has been a certain obnoxious group of folk when it comes to the fan base of Fabula Ultima, who feel the need to insert themselves and say, just play Fabula Ultima in any conversation involving converting different console-style RPGs to tabletop, or even different anime. And Lancer fans, you're not off the hook either, because I've seen that exact thing with trying to act like Lancer can run every kind of mech anime. Now I could make a better argument with Battle Century G, but that's an argument I've made years ago, and I stand by. But if that argument is going to be put forth, then I think it's completely reasonable to show Fabula Ultima's limitations and the fact that, despite it claiming to be able to be run to do all manner of console-style RPGs, in reality, it's no matter what's said with the Atlas books, it is ultimately skewed towards SNES era Final Fantasy in practice. And that is why I said as a coda last time. It may say this is your story. I argue that your story never got a chance to be written. Now, with that said, that is going to do it for this particular episode of The Valley. I will be back here tomorrow covering more of Shadowscar, which has been really good. And of course there'll be more of Augusta Universalis on Friday. As mentioned before, the Cloister of the Dice is on a pause for the time being until things get a little bit more stable on Saturdays. There may be a soft reset coming. I'm weighing options on that. And keep the liquor on standby because on Sunday we have a intermission episode of the Record of Swordforged Worlds involving me dealing with one particular video that's been a thorn in my side for the last few months. So keep an eye out for that, and again, bring the rum. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra. I am your gaming monk. Stay fucking frosty, everybody.
See you on the trail.